Moving on to the next session. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Irfan Ahmad Khan, sir, an assistant professor in Department of Pharmacology, JNMC Aligarh. Sir is the deputy coordinator of Adverse Drug Reaction Monitoring Center in JNMC Aligarh. He has also been well trained in causality assessment, pharmacogenomic study, designing and conducting clinical trials. Sir has been awarded honorary Rosalind member of London Journal Press. He is currently an editor-in-chief of the journal Advances in Biopharmaceuticals and being an editorial board member of various deputed journals. Now, Sir will be educating us on the topic clinical trial data management. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible to you? Or my slides are visible to you?
Yes, sir, you're audible and your slides are visible.
Okay, thank you very much. Today, I am going to talk about the clinical trial data management. My emphasis will be on regulatory compliance and quality control. So what is clinical data management? It involves the critical phase in which the clinical research leads to the generation of high quality data, reliable data, and statistically sound data. So clinical data management involves all these processes, and it is the collection of and cleaning and the management of subject data in compliance with the regulatory standards, so that we have maximized data for the analysis and we have the minimum number of errors and the missing data. So these forms the primary objective of the CDM. So coming to the regulations, guidelines, and standards in CDM, as per the good clinical practice, all clinical research data should be recorded, handled, and stored in a way that allows accurate reporting, interpretation, and verification. There should be systems with procedures that assure the quality of every aspect of research should be implemented. There are processes of quality assurance and quality check systems with written standard operating procedures, which help us in implementing and maintaining so as to ensure that the research is conducted and the data generated and documented and recorded, and the report in the compliance with the protocol or the GCP or the applicable regulatory requirements. If the data are to be transformed during the process, it should always be possible to compare the original data and observation with the preceding data. That means if there are any changes, we should have always the original data so that we can compare it with the previous data. And the sponsor should use an unambiguous subject identity number, or there should be a coding system that allows the identification of all data reported for each subject. So unique ID number is allocated for all the individual subjects. And the protocol amendment, if there are any protocol amendments that necessitate a change in the design of the case record form, subject diaries, or any study worksheet or research database or key aspects of the CDM process, it should be enrolled and controlled way. The common standards should be adopted for a number of features of research, such as dictionaries of medical terms, definitions, and timing of main measurement, handling the protocol deviation. So for the electronic data, there are we follow the Code of Federal Regulation, Chapter 21 and Part 11. So these are applicable for the electronic format of data. So the electronic format data are created, maintained, modified, retrieved, and archived easily. So that is one of the advantages of the electronic data recording. So it demands the use of validated system to ensure accuracy, reliability, and consistency. And one of the major benefits that this electronic data has is it is secure, computer-generated, and time-stamped audit trails to independently record the date and time of the operator entries and the action that create, modify, or delete electronic records. So this is one of the major benefits which the electronic records has over the paper-based manual recording system of the clinical record forms. So there are other guidelines such as the good clinical data management practices guidelines, which was laid down by the Society for the Clinical Data Management in the September 2000. And these guidelines provide guidance on the accepted practices in the clinical data management that are consistent with the regulatory practices. There is another clinical data interchange standard consortium, which is a multidisciplinary non-profit organization, and it has developed standards to support acquisition, exchange, submission, and archival of clinical research data and metadata. So what is this metadata? It is the data of the data entered. So it includes all the data about the individual who made the entry or a change in the clinical data, date and time when the entry or the change has been made, and the details of the changes that has been made into the data. It has got two standards. One of those is the Study Data Tabulation Model Implementation Guideline for Human Clinical Trials, which includes the details of the model and the standard terminologies which are being used for the data recording. And the second is the C-, that is the Clinical Data Acquisition Standard Harmonization, and it has the basic standards for collection of the data in a clinical trial. So what are the activities which are there in the data collection? So first we do data acquisition or collection, then the data is abstracted or extracted, then the coding and the processing of the data is done, which is sent for the analysis, and then sponsor data. So before moving ahead, for every program, we have a data management plan, which is a document which handles all the data under foreseeable circumstances, and it describes the CDM activities which are to be followed in the trial. So this plan has the database design, the methods to enter the data, they have the guidelines for data tracking, then measures to quality control, then there are guidelines for the serious adverse event reconciliation, and management of discrepancies is one of the major part of the data management plan. And there are guidelines for how to transfer this data, and finally the database. There are tools for clinical data management, and they are known as the clinical data management systems. So the one in the black, these are the commercially available for the pharmaceutical company. They are very expensive ones, like the Oracle Clinical, ClinTrial, FIDIT, Entry Point, Macro, Rave, and the eClinical suite. The entry point has been given by the far side. The Open Clinica is the open source CDM program. So these Open Clinica, Open CDMS, and Trial IDP, these are the free softwares which are available online for the clinical data management. So what is high quality data? High quality data should be absolutely accurate and suitable for statistical analysis, and it should meet the protocol specified parameters and comply with the protocol requirements, so that the regulatory authorities may look and audit at the data for the data integrity. So in short, we can say that high quality data should have the minimal or no misses, should have the acceptable level of variations only, and the data should also meet the applicable regulatory requirements specified for data quality. What is the flow chart? How we are going to do the clinical data management? So in the initial, we have the data management plan. And after this, we receive the CRF from the sites. We do the tracking for the completeness of the CRF, and we do the compilation of the case record forms. Then the database is designed or the application is developed, which is validated, finalized, and deployed for the data collection. So first, the data is entered by two separate operators so that there should be a lesser chances of errors. And if there are any discrepancies or queries generated during the data entry, then the query is sent to the site and we get the resolution, and the data is entered again by the second separate operator. And if all the queries are resolved, then the database is updated. And if unresolved, then requery is sent to the site and the query has to be resolved. With final resolution of all the data, we update the data in the database, and then this database is exported and the file is transferred to the biostatistics, who check for the raw data checking, and then analyzes the data and then enters into the table list and figure and for quality assurance review. And after quality assurance review, the tables, list, and figures are finalized and the data is logged and the clinical study report is prepared. Sometimes before moving ahead with the data locking, a pre-locking is also sometimes done so that if there are any errors or chances of errors, it should be rectified before locking the data. And once the data is locked, it has to go for analysis and no major changes can be done. So the quality control in CDM is maintained by an audit trail of the data management activities. It helps in managing discrepancies and it creates the roles and responsibility in a structured way. So there are multiple users in the CDM program who have a limited access to the data entry, medical coding, database designing, or the quality check. So they no one person can do all the things like data entry or the medical coding. So they have their user ID, so they can do the functioning or the programs which they have been assigned. So if there is any change in the responsibility during a program or the clinical trial, so then the software will record the changes that has been made. User ID that made the change has to be recorded and the date and time of the change is also to be recorded. So that will help us to check whether the data has been entered properly or not. And during a regulatory trial done by the regulatory authorities, the auditors can verify if there are discrepancies in the management processes, changes made, and can confirm that no unauthorized or false changes were made. So the auditors, they check that no missed data or any errors are there in the data management or any unauthorized entries have been made during the audit trial. So one very important field is the medical coding system, which helps in identifying and classifying medical terminologies. And it is the classification used for the classification of event, and medical dictionaries available online are used for this purpose. So the person who is involved in the medical coding should have the technical knowledge about the medical terminologies, disease entities, drugs which are used during the clinical trials, the pathological processes which are there. Then they should be functionally capable to electronic medical dictionaries. They should be able to understand the medical dictionaries, and they should be able to understand what are the hierarchy of the classification of these different disease system or the different treatment system. And so what are the tools which are used in the medical coding? So MEDRA is one of the tools which is used for coding of adverse event. It is the medical dictionaries for regulatory activities, and it is used for coding of adverse event. Even in the pharmacovigilance program, we use this MEDRA for the adverse event coding. Second is the WHO Drug Dictionary Enhanced, which is used for coding of the medications. And WHO ART deals with the adverse reaction terminologies. So these are the online available tools for medical coding, which are often used during the clinical trials for coding different disease system, medications, adverse event, etc. So much has been talked about the case report form in details, but pertaining to the data management, I am going to talk in a brief about this CRF, that it is the data reporting document used in the clinical trials, and it collects the data in a standardized format according to the protocol, complying with the regulatory requirements and allowing for the efficient analysis. So what is a case record form? It allows for the efficient and complete data collection, processing, analyzing, and reporting. And it facilitates the exchange of data across the projects and organizations, especially through standardization. So always the case record forms, they are accompanied by an instruction manual or the completion manual is there, so that the case record forms are completely filled and the proper data has been entered. There are two types of case record forms. One is the paper-based, other is the electronic or the web interface. So this one is the paper-based and this one is the electronic CRF. So if there are any corrections to be made in the paper-based CRF, so what we have to do is to draw a horizontal line and make the necessary change. No scribbling, using of whiteners or fluids are to be not to be used. And what it helps these procedures ensure a complete audit trail exists for all the entries. So the correct data is entered, the initials are given, the date is mentioned about the changes. So better than these are the electronic case record forms, because these record the data from the source document to the electronic database or web interface, and they are periodically transmitted to the sponsor or the CRO, or automatically reside with the sponsored database. So the real-time review of the data can be performed by the clinical research associate, in-house clinical research associate. So the number of visits of the clinical research associate to the site of the clinical trial is less. And if there are electronic queries generated, it can be easily sent to the site for the corrections, and the database is easily logged, and no further changes are easily permitted in the electronic case record form. So it is a teamwork which performs the clinical data monitoring, and the data manager, they supervise the entire process of CDM, and they prepare the data management plan, approve the CDM procedures and all internal documents related to the CDM activities. They control and allocate the database access to the team members. Then there are the designers of the database or the database programmers who create the study database and program the edit checks for that data validation, perform the case record form annotations. And there are the medical coders who provide the coding of the adverse event, history, co-illness, or the concomitant medical administration. Then there are the coordinators of the clinical data who design the CRF. They prepare the filling instructions or the manuals, and then they develop the data validation plan and their discrepancy management. The trial-related documents, checklists, and the guideline documents all are prepared by the clinical data coordinator. Then there are quality control associates who check for the accuracy of the data entry and conducts the data audit. They verify the documents pertaining to the trial being followed. And the data entry associates, they do the data entry, they do the tracking of the case record forms. The last part is the quality control, how it is maintained. So according to the GCP section 5.1.3, the quality control should be applied to each stage of data handling to ensure that all the data are reliable and have been processed correctly. So what is the process of assessing the quality check and the quality assurance? Is that, are the staff checking their work? Are the staff relying on others to check their work? Does the organization have a quality assurance plan for monitoring protocol adherence and data collection? Are there SOPs related to data management? How soon after a visit is a CRF completed? And is all data as defined by the protocol captured from the source document onto the case record forms? Many times it happens that the case record form, they do not have the all entries from the source document, and sometimes those entries are also made, they are which are not actually required. So quality control is done at the individual team member level, and it is an ongoing and concurrent review of subject data, and typically it should be 100%. Checking your own work and the work of others is the primary aim, and it verifies that the data is collected and abstracted correctly, entered onto the case record form, able to be found in the source document, and follows the regulations and guidelines. While quality assurance is a planned systematic checks done at the branch or the organization level, quality control is done at the individual subject level, while the quality assurance is done at the branch or the organization level, and it verifies that the trial is performed as per the approved plan, the data generated is accurate, and it identifies the problems and the trends retrospectively, and involves the sampling of subjects. They pull all the pieces together and gain a picture of compliance and ensure that the staff is compliant with the internal and the external regulations and guidelines. So what are the quality assurance activity? Internal monitoring or audits, they help in the compiling all data components and gain a measurement of the compliance. Review clarification responses before they are submitted to the sponsors. and measure data inconsistencies and trends using a sampling of the data prior to audit or the monitoring. So whenever we have an audit or the monitoring is to be done, we should measure the data inconsistencies and trends. And we should summarize all the findings of the quality assurance and should report it to the management to take necessary steps. So how the quality improvement can be done? It is a result of the quality control and the quality assurance. So it will help in developing a plan by identifying the root causes of problems, intervening to reduce or eliminate these problems, and taking steps to correct the process, and identifying the trends and areas of improvement, which will help in a better clinical trial or help in a better collection of the data related to the clinical trials. So ultimately, this data management will help us to move from here to here. That means in a tumbled way, we are having the data, huge data we have. So the CDM helps us to get a proper picture so that we can analyze the data properly. We have the proper entries in the correct places. Thank you very much for your patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable presentation. Sir, we have a question from our delegate. Like they have asked to kindly quote the references for the trial monitoring and quality control.
Okay, these guidelines are taken from the good clinical practice, and and for the electronic CRF we have that 21 chapter Code of Federal Regulations that is for the electronic CRF.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you once.